no longer behaves rationally. It is sort of overtaken by eschatological fever, right? So if you look at videos coming out of Israel, there are rabbis going around saying,
it's what's so interesting is that, 25 years ago at 9/11, whatever you think of how that happened and why, there was, I saw it personally,
mosque, which is actually which could happen during this war, given what we've seen so far. So the Israelis have closed off the Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as other religious sites. Like, he was politically dead, right? Because the January 6th riots happened. He was impeached twice, and then after he left office, there was lawfare conducted again. Okay, so it's possible this is all Netanyahu and all his machinations. And another fourth possibility is they have co-opted him. Like, there's blackmail on him. There's and he has absolutely no choice but to do what he says.
Look, I'm going to be straight with you right now. What you're about to watch is genuinely one of the most unsettling conversations I've seen in a long time. Tucker Carlson sits down with Professor Jiang, and they're talking about what America should do next in the Middle East. But here's where it gets absolutely wild. Jiang starts connecting dots between Christian Zionists, evangelical eschatology, secret societies, and the possibility that powerful shadow forces are literally following an ancient religious script to trigger the end times. And the craziest part, when you look at what's actually happening right now, the Al-Aqsa Mosque being closed off, rumors of archaeological digs underneath it, Trump surrounded by people with very specific religious agendas, it's hard to dismiss what he's saying. Tucker's trying to figure out if Trump even knows what role he's playing in all this. Is he a willing participant, a manipulated actor, or is Netanyahu just controlling everything? Watch how this unfolds. Let's get into it.
If you were the commander-in-chief of the United States, what would you do at this point as of today?
Commander-in-chief meaning Donald Trump?
Yeah. You get to make the decisions. What does America do next if it's acting in its own interest, if it's trying to preserve its power and wealth? At this point, what does it do?
Well, first of all, I would acknowledge that all these events are interconnected, right? So this trade war of China, this war in Ukraine, this war in the Middle East, it's all interconnected because the American empire is too overstretched and it has its fingers on everything. And so it allows its enemies to provoke it into these never-ending wars. So what I would do is basically sit down everyone, okay, including Russia, China, Iran, and say, it's time for a new world order where we are partners in this relationship, right? Before America was the hegemon, before the US dollar was the world reserve currency. But now what we want to do is open a dialogue where everyone is respected, where America is no longer the bully, but a willing partner in creating a new economic order that benefits everyone and not just a few.
I think that's the wisest possible advice and probably the only path that preserves civilization. But the one country standing in the way of that is Israel, which is the only beneficiary of this war, as you just said. I think that's true. Can you think of another beneficiary other than Israel of this war?
Well, Russia benefits, right? Because Russia is trying to win this war in Ukraine.
That's correct.
And America is forced to lift oil sanctions. And so now Russia is now able to take all these war profits, right? And then help the Iranians, finance the Iranians in the struggle against the Americans and Israelis. So the Russians also benefit tremendously from this war.
Yeah, but fair point. Israel has to be constrained by the United States in order to do what you just recommended it do. Is that possible? Does the American president have the authority to control its client state?
So if you look at the domestic situation in Israel, Israel no longer behaves rationally. It is sort of overtaken by eschatological fever, right? So if you look at videos coming out of Israel, there are rabbis going around saying that this war in the Middle East, even though it's destroying Tel Aviv, it's good for us because this will lead to the coming of our Messiah. So they believe that it is when Israel is under the most strain. When when the very existence of Israel is threatened, then God will intervene because the Jewish people will come together as a nation again and commit themselves, renew their faith in God. And once God sees the blind, trusting, absolute faith of the Jewish people, then he will save his people by sending his Messiah, who will then redeem the Jewish people. So another way of saying this is secular temporal matters don't really matter. This war in the Middle East, not an issue. What matters is divinity. What matters is our relationship with God.
Yes.
So what matters is faith. If nuclear bombs go flying, doesn't really matter.
It's what's so interesting is that, 25 years ago at 9/11, whatever you think of how that happened and why, there was, I saw it personally, a political Islam. There were Wahhabists. There were a lot of Islamic radicals around the world. And for a bunch of reasons over 25 years, that hasn't disappeared. There still exist Islamic radicals, but it's not, an important political force anymore. At the same time, as Islam in general has become much more moderate, and the GCC is kind of the most obvious example of this, there has been a rise of Jewish Wahhabism and evangelical Christian Wahhabism, so to speak. I mean, you've seen this eschatological extremism among some American Protestants, Christians, and some Israeli and American Jews. How did that happen? What is that?
Right. So first of all, I don't think we can ever overestimate the influence of eschatology in American politics.
Exactly.
So I'll give you an example where about a quarter of Americans are evangelicals, and a lot of them are Christian Zionists. So they believe that Israel is crucial, the linchpin to achieving God's plan and the return of Jesus. And so a very prominent figure that you probably know very well is John Hagee, who runs something called the Christians United for Israel. It's 7 million members. And these are the people who are financing a lot of the conflict in the Middle East, in Israel, because they're the ones who are funding West Bank settlements. And so Christian Zionism, it is an extremely powerful political force in America. So your question is, how did this happen? And
yes,
the issue is that this is a plan that has been in motion for centuries, and it's a very complicated history. But it involves different religious groups among the Jews, Septime Frankists, Shabbat Lubavitch, which you've talked about. But it also involves the Freemasons, the Knights Templars, the Rosicrucians. It involves the Jesuits. So you have these different secret societies, different religious organizations working together through the centuries to achieve this plan for the end of the world, which heralds the Messianic age. Okay, and there are different components of this plan. But the basic components are, one is the creation of the nation state of Israel, which happened in 1948. And then you need to have the building of the third temple, which requires the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is actually, which could happen during this war, given what we've seen so far. So the Israelis have closed off the Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as other religious sites like the Church of Holy Sepulchre, to tourists these past few days. There's rumors that for the past 2 years, the Israelis have been conducting these archaeological digs under the Al-Aqsa Mosque to basically destroy the foundations of the mosque, so that they can conduct a controlled demolition of the mosque and blame it on a missile strike from the Iranians. And there's actually talk among the Israelis of using this plan to ignite a war between the Arabs and the Persians. So the Al-Aqsa Mosque needs to be destroyed for the third temple. They also talk about this war of Gog and Magog between Israel and the entire world. Then the coming of the Jewish Messiah, the creation of the Greater Israel Project, the return of all Jews from the diaspora. So there are different components to this plan. If you just
Okay, so I need you guys to understand what just happened there because this is absolutely insane. Professor Jiang just laid out that there are literal rabbis in Israel right now saying that this war, this potential World War III scenario we're staring down, is actually good because it will bring the Messiah. Like nuclear war, not a problem. Millions of people dying, doesn't matter. Because in their mind, when Israel is on the brink of destruction, that's when God intervenes and sends the Messiah to save the Jewish people. And here's what makes this even more terrifying. These aren't fringe voices anymore. This isn't some guy on a street corner with a sign. This is a significant faction within Israeli society that has genuine political power. And Tucker's about to connect this to something even bigger, the Christian Zionist movement in America. Because, dude, a quarter of Americans are evangelicals, and millions of them, 7 million in John Hagee's Christians United for Israel alone, are financially backing West Bank settlements and Israeli military actions because they believe Israel is the key to bringing Jesus back. These are the same people who have massive influence over Republican politics. These are the people funding campaigns, organizing voters, and pushing for policies that keep America locked into unconditional support for whatever Israel does. So now you've got Jewish eschatology in Israel saying the war is necessary for the Messiah, and you've got Christian eschatology in America saying Israel must be protected at all costs for the second coming. And both groups are working toward the same apocalyptic endpoint. They just disagree on which Messiah shows up. And the thing is, Professor Jiang is not some conspiracy theorist. He's an academic. And he's sitting here telling Tucker that secret societies, Freemasons, Jesuits, and religious organizations have been working on this plan for centuries. The creation of Israel in 1948, the push to rebuild the Third Temple, which requires destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the war of Gog and Magog, Greater Israel, the return of all Jews from the diaspora. These aren't abstract theological concepts anymore. These are active geopolitical goals that powerful people are pursuing right now. And here's the part that should terrify you. Jiang mentions that the Israelis have allegedly been conducting archaeological digs under the Al-Aqsa Mosque for 2 years. The rumor is they're weakening the foundations so they can do a controlled demolition and blame it on an Iranian missile strike. If that happens, if that mosque gets destroyed during this war, you will see the entire Muslim world explode. That's 1.8 billion people. That's not just Iran. That's Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia. Every single Muslim-majority country will be pulled into this conflict because the Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest site in Islam. And the Israelis would know that. Netanyahu would absolutely know that destroying that mosque would ignite a civilizational war between Arabs and Persians, between Muslims and Jews, and drag America into the middle of it. But if you believe this is all part of God's plan, if you believe the Messiah is coming, and this is all necessary suffering to get there, then civilian casualties don't matter. Nuclear war doesn't matter. Human civilization doesn't matter, because you're operating on a timeline that transcends this world. That's what's so dangerous about eschatology driving foreign policy. You can't negotiate with someone who thinks they're fulfilling a divine script. You can't reason with someone who believes mass death is a feature, not a bug. And right now, the people pushing these policies have influence over both the Israeli government and significant portions of the American government. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that, because this isn't abstract anymore. This is happening right now.
Events. We're seeing these events converge together today. I mean, all these events are playing out. So it seems as though there are these very powerful shadow forces working behind the scenes. We don't know who they are, but it seems as though they're able to control geopolitics in a certain manner as to fulfill their eschatological script.
What role do you think Donald Trump plays in this?
That's a really hard question to answer. So let's look at different possibilities. Okay, the first possibility is that he's been employed as an actor and he's just following a script, but he doesn't really know where this movie is going. He's just doing his part, but he's manipulated behind the scenes by people around him. And when reporters asked him, like, why is this war in Iran happening? He did say that his advisors, which include Sivakov, Jared Kushner, Peter Hegseth, Marco Rubio, told him that the Iranians were so close to getting a nuclear weapon and that the Iranians were going to attack first. And so I was basically misled. And I think that's probably true in that Trump surrounds himself with certain people that have a certain political eschatological agenda. So that's one possibility, that he's just an actor. Another possibility is that he himself has a messianic calling. Okay, and what I mean by that is, if you go back to January 2021, he was politically dead, right? Because the January 6th riots happened. He was impeached twice, and then after he left office, there was lawfare conducted against him, and he went bankrupt. So it was as though the entire world went against him. But now he's president of the United States. And so how would he personally understand this? I think a lot of it is God has asked him to serve. There's a call to serve, and he has to fulfill a mission. But what this mission is, okay? What this mission is, whether it's to save Israel, whether it's to save America, whether it's a part of a grander scheme, only he in his heart knows. And I think no one except him knows, okay? So I think that's another possibility. And the third possibility is that this is all Israel's doing. Netanyahu is the one who's forced him into this sort of situation because the Israelis attacked first. And Marco Rubio said this, where, you know what, we wanted these negotiations, but the Israelis were planning to attack. If they attacked, the Iranians would be compelled to attack both the Americans and the Israelis. And we did not want to put our soldiers in harm's way, so we attacked with the Israelis. Okay, so it's possible this is all Netanyahu and all his machinations. And another fourth possibility is they have co-opted him. Like, there's blackmail on him. There's and he has absolutely no choice but to do what he says because he's compromised in a certain way, and maybe his family is under threat. So all four are possibilities, and quite honestly, I have no idea which possibility is the most correct.
All right, so let's talk about what Professor Jiang just laid out about Trump, because this is genuinely one of the most important questions right now. What role is Donald Trump actually playing in all of this? And Jiang gives us four possibilities, right? The first one is that Trump is just an actor. He's reading lines. He doesn't know where the script goes. He's surrounded by people like Jared Kushner, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, people with very specific eschatological and geopolitical agendas. And they're feeding him information. They told him Iran was about to get a nuke. They told him Iran was going to attack first. So he authorized the strike. And now he's stuck in a war he didn't fully understand when he greenlit it. That's possibility one. The second possibility is even wilder, that Trump himself believes he has a messianic calling. Think about it. January 2021, the guy was politically dead, impeached twice, bankrupt, lawfare coming at him from every direction. The entire establishment wanted him gone. And now he's president again. How does someone process that? Maybe he genuinely believes God saved him for a reason. Maybe he thinks he's supposed to save Israel. Maybe he thinks he's supposed to save America. Maybe he thinks this is all part of some divine plan that only he understands. We don't know what's in his heart. Only he does. The third possibility is that Netanyahu is running the entire show. That Israel attacked Iran knowing full well it would force a response. Knowing it would drag America into the war. And Trump had no choice but to back Israel because that's the political reality in Washington. Marco Rubio basically admitted this. He said they didn't want to put American soldiers in harm's way, but Israel was going to strike anyway, so they struck together. So maybe Trump is just along for the ride because Netanyahu is calling the shots. And the fourth possibility, and this is the darkest one, is that Trump has been compromised, that there's blackmail, that someone has leverage over him or his family, and he has absolutely no choice but to do what he's told. We know he's had financial entanglements with foreign governments. We know he's been bailed out by certain people. So maybe he's not in control at all. And here's the thing, Professor Jiang is right. We don't know which one it is. Maybe it's a combination. Maybe it's none of them. But what we do know is this. The trajectory we're on right now, the one where religious extremism is driving foreign policy, where apocalyptic thinking is influencing decisions about nuclear weapons, where shadow forces are pushing us towards civilizational conflict, that trajectory ends in unimaginable suffering for ordinary people. Because here's who doesn't benefit from this war. Working people in America, working people in Iran, civilians in Israel, civilians in Gaza, regular people anywhere. The only people who benefit are defense contractors, religious extremists who want to see their prophecies fulfilled, and politicians who use war to consolidate power and distract from domestic failures. And Tucker's original question at the beginning of this video was the right one. If you were the commander-in-chief, what would you do? And Professor Jiang gave the only sane answer. You sit down with Russia, China, Iran, and you negotiate a new world order where America is no longer the global bully, but a partner. Where we respect other countries instead of dictating terms. Where we prioritize diplomacy over bombs. But that requires the American president to have the political will to stand up to Netanyahu, to stand up to AIPAC, to stand up to the military-industrial complex, to stand up to the Christian Zionist lobby. And right now, I don't know if Trump has that will. I don't know if any American president does, because the forces pushing for this war are so deeply embedded in our political system. So here's what I want you to do. Share this video. Get this conversation out there. Because the mainstream media is not having this discussion. They're not talking about eschatology. They're not talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They're not talking about the financial and religious interests driving this war. And people need to know what's actually happening before it's too late. Drop a comment and let me know. Do you think Trump knows what role he's playing in this? Or is he just being used by forces he doesn't fully understand? Because that's the question that's going to determine where we go from here. That's what we do here at MB. Stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.